Next 12 months are solidifying some services that we're seeing are more in need, and that we're filling for some clients, and that I think there's going to be a lot more need for that in the future. I've always hated the term virtual CISO because there's nothing virtual about it, but the concept of a fractional CISO, or as we do it in practice, really some hours from principal or executive level consultants like myself and some of the 30-year folks that I have on staff, but also portions, of individuals who specialize in different areas.
Hey guys, and welcome to the Grow IT podcast. Your host here, Alessandro Cutri, joined today by none other than Mark Ferrari. We'll be diving into his story, a little bit about his company, Latitude Information Security, and much more within the cybersecurity space. So definitely make sure to stick around. But without further ado, I'll just pass it on over to my Italian friend over here, Mark. If you don't mind just introducing yourself and telling the audience a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are today.
Will do. I'll give it my best. My name is Mark Ferrari. I'm the founder and currently president and CEO of Latitude Information Security. We're a full service information security consultancy with a nationwide client base. How did I get here? Grew up in North Jersey, ended up at Villanova University, where I met my wife of 30 plus years, and following getting a business degree at Villanova, took a commission in the United States Air Force and served a number of years as an officer in the Air Force. I was a nuclear weapons officer, and so my job was to ensure the operations and the security and the launch capability of Minuteman II and Minuteman III nuclear missiles. Very interesting place to start, and probably one of the most direct influences on my day-to-day here in cybersecurity, because let me tell you, the physical, administrative, and technical controls around our nuclear weapons are kind of they were a master's degree in cybersecurity and how to assure it. Upon transitioning out of active duty, I got into information technology. It was around Y2K when that was, very prominent, and so the career field was very, a good one to get into. And so started in healthcare IT specifically. Started out as a programmer, got into, based on my leadership experience in the military, got into project management roles, and then ultimately, as project management methodology evolved, so too was the necessity for information security to grow within the healthcare industry in particular. And so as a project manager, more and more elements of my projects were related to specifically cybersecurity controls that we know today. So I ended up going completely into compliance and cybersecurity projects, and then ultimately into consulting. And just about 6 years ago, founded Latitude, and happy to have a team of really talented professionals that really make a difference for our clients.
That's awesome. And I love it's always interesting to me to see how I feel that cybersecurity is one of those industries where whenever I talk to founders and CEOs, they have the coolest backstories. They do something crazy to then get into cybersecurity, right? And to pursue a career in it. And obviously you went from being in the IT space to then starting your own company. What was that transition like? And I guess what was it that prompted you to want to start Latitude in the first place?
Yeah. Well, so, I think one of the best ways, if you're going to go into business for yourself, if I can offer some free advice, I love the saying, and I forget who I borrowed it from, but learn to shave on someone else's face, right? So I became a leader of a practice within a small information security consultancy, and so really in a smaller firm, not of my own, but of another colleague who headed that up and gave me the opportunity to lead that practice. Built up the security practice there. We then went through a merger and kind of joined into a larger company. And it was at that point that I took stock of, we did this once. I think we can do it again. And it was just a kind of all of the stars aligned in terms of my personal risk, my ability to kind of float my own life for at least a 90-day period, if not more.
Mhm.
And so, and there were some clients that were interested in signing on with me. So off I went, uh, founded Latitude, and worked initially as a working principal, and then built it up to where we are today.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's awesome, man. It's always interesting to see how, you can get into that entrepreneurial mode, right? Because, your whole, I mean, it seems like this was your one of your first businesses that you started, right? In that sense, or
Yeah,
yeah.
Latitude is the only business, yeah, I've ever founded. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so it's interesting, right? And I guess, I love the saying of, I don't think I've ever heard that before. You have to be prepared to learn how to shave someone else's face. Is that what it is?
learn to shave on someone else's face.
Learn to shave on someone else's face. Yeah. And so what other advice would you be able, say like, there's a lot of, because we get a lot of founders and CEOs that tune in. What's some advice that you would give to someone to kind of, maybe they're thinking about wanting to start a business, but they're maybe a little bit, let's just say hesitant, right, to
Mhm.
do it because they know it requires that leap of faith.
Yeah.
What would you say to those people, if they're in that kind of situation?
Number one is that you cannot eliminate risk entirely. You will be vulnerable. You will take a risk. If you believe in yourself, if you believe in your product, your services, whatever it is, your expertise, then do it. Because as much as you can look at folks that have done it, and you might think, oh, they're so much smarter than I am. They're so much more financially backed than I am. You can look at all of the things and think, I'm not in that position. The
Mhm.
truth is, all it takes with many successful people in terms of starting a business is the decision to do it.
Yeah.
It is always best if you've gone through a number of the core things that you're going to need to know about, though, in some degree.
Mhm.
Like you have to be literate in accounting and finance. You have to
Yeah.
be literate in legal terms and contract terms. You have to be literate in structuring your engagements and in client relationships and in managing people. So you've got to have some degree of understanding of that. You can't go in without, those are the core tenets that you need in your back pocket. So
Yeah.
if you don't have them, you need people around you that do, because you're going to need to rely on them because nobody's going to be there. Um, in the end, you're the final decision maker. And so if you don't have kind of that core understanding of those fundamentals, you'll probably make some less than optimal decisions.
Definitely, definitely, right. It's one of those things that you have to either learn on the job at some point, and you have to go through the pain of not knowing them, right? Because you didn't
Yeah,
have that fundamental understanding. But to your point, it's one of those things that you have to in the beginning, especially too, right? When you first start your business, you mostly likely are the business, right? Maybe
yeah,
you have a couple of employees, but even then, you're not really a business until you really have a team around you, and you're out of the day to day for the most part. But to your point, you're going to need to have become proficient at a lot of different skills, which, you know, if you're not, you're going to be, fall into the crack. A lot of times, I talk to founders or even, more technical based founders, and especially within the IT and tech SaaS space, I
yeah,
talk with a lot of them, and they're more like, oh, I don't want to do the sales. Like, I don't want to get good at sales. Like, I don't want to learn how to, sell. Well, I'm like, that's kind of part of being a founder is like you gotta have to learn how to do those things that you may not even like to do, but it's part of the business, right? It's part
yeah.
of growing the business itself. So 100% agree, 100% agree. Now, I did want to segue a little bit into Latitude, right? Obviously, you mentioned you guys are, a security consulting company, but could you just go a little bit deeper into that for the audience? That's like, hey,
Mhm.
I understand they do security consulting, but what would you say that like, the value proposition really is over
Sure.
at what you guys do?
I would say the number one, cybersecurity services. We don't sell software. We don't sell a monitoring platform or anything like that. We come in and basically guide organizations, right? Because cybersecurity is a very complex topic. It's an area in which you need a trusted advisor. Um, our staff comes in, and typically it comes. We meet a client that's in either one of two places. One is they have a framework or a regulatory requirement with which they must comply, and they have to demonstrate compliance. Or they're just aware that if they're going to compete in a certain marketplace, if they're going to try and get a certain clientele, they're going to have their house in order from a security perspective, particularly in healthcare where we do a lot of work and pharmaceuticals. So we will come in and we'll, number one, talk to them, find out about their business. One of the best compliments that we've ever received was from an organization in communications, actually. They'd done business with some of the big four in the past. And after our engagement, they said, nobody took the time to understand us the way you did. And so I think that's key, number one, is we have to understand where our clients are, what they're doing before we can come in and say, hey, you should hire us for this service or that service.
Yeah, yeah, and if you don't mind to go into like obviously don't have to drop any names here, but just examples of maybe a company that you guys were able to help out that kind of came to you maybe with some issues and you guys were able to help solve some of those. Like I said, you don't have to
Sure.
drop any names because I know obviously security is a sensitive.
Sure. We do a lot of work in healthcare, and our clientele is primarily health systems and digital health organizations that have to do business with health systems.
Yeah.
This one digital health company comes to mind because they've been with us for a full 5 years now.
Mhm.
They knew that they were going to have to compete in the healthcare space. They knew they were going to receive data, very sensitive patient data from health systems. And so they were going to have to demonstrate compliance with a very rigid cybersecurity framework, in this case, high trust. So the first thing we did was we came in, we got to understand what they do, which is actually really, really interesting and kind of advanced, specialized medication dosing. And we took a look at the standard that they would have to comply with, and we did a more or less a gap assessment and said, this is where you're meeting it, this is where you're not meeting it.
Mhm.
Where we differentiate ourselves is we go a little bit further and we don't just give them, a list of gaps and say, have a nice day. We give them a remediation plan. That remediation plan is specific enough to them that it's actionable. All
Mhm.
right. It's not just a very generic, you need to implement a DLP plan. Well, great. No kidding. Here's a DLP plan that we think would work for you. Here's how we would recommend starting it out, at least in the first phases. We're going to give them a little bit of a nudge towards that so that they can start with some momentum. But where we also kind of come in is that, it, in my view, in cybersecurity, no matter what the field, organizations are over-assessed and under-remediated, right?
Mhm.
Everybody's got a risk assessment. That's
Yeah.
great. They don't have people or they don't have trusted partners to help them remediate or fix those gaps.
Mm.
And that's where we came in,
Yeah.
help them fix those gaps, help them get certified, and then stayed with them as a core part of or a core element in their cybersecurity program. And so we kind of grow with our clients' needs. Some years might be a bigger engagement than others, but we're there as they need us, and we're not trying to one up every year. We're trying to meet what they need at that time, and that's kind of how we foster a true partnership that lasts.
And I love that. And I think it's one of those things where, it's all about, to your point, right? I feel a lot of cybersecurity companies, they're just maybe thinking about, identifying and maybe, auditing and figuring out what's wrong, but they're not actually going into figuring out, hey, how do we make sure these are all patched, and how do we make sure that, you're not going to be vulnerable in the future, right? And I definitely could see the value in that sense because, I mean, it's one of those things, right? Especially the healthcare space, right? I mean, you mentioned you guys are in the healthcare, system space. I mean, they're the most heavily targeted, right? Out of, I think, every industry, right? I think
They
maybe
are, yeah,
senior care might be like one of the up there, but I know healthcare is like one of the predominantly,
yeah,
you know, um, most vulnerable, right? So
it
it's
is.
like they have to be, on top of their stuff for that itself. And so I love that you explained it in that way. But in terms of when it comes to first rolling out, like if when you first roll out your offering, right? And just as for founders that are curious, like, okay, how do I go about starting and even starting my company, and like what is it that I can do to really get new clients and new clientele and get people to go and get people to buy into what it is that I'm doing. how do you go about that? Like, how did you go about that in the beginning and, selling what
Yeah.
you have?
In the beginning, you have your own reputation to rely on, and
Yeah.
so and I think that's really what the crutch is in the beginning.
Yeah.
You're hopefully and most likely going to establish engagements with organizations that already know you,
Yeah.
and therefore already have some degree of trust with you. But then you have to build on that, and you have to show that you're not just an independent contractor, but you're actually building a company.
Yeah.
One of the, and so you'll need to very practically be able to articulate what your services are and what the deliverables are. And that's a very kind of black and white exercise. But then getting your name out there, listen, I'm 6 years in, and that still is top of mind when I wake up in the morning is how do we continue to get our name out there? You can start a company on friends and family, so to speak, and I'm happy that we've had a very high client retention rate. We've had a lot of referrals for our new business, but we need to get, if you're not looking at that's not going to suffice as a scalable model in terms of how to get business. You've got to look at how do we build that sales organization,
Yeah.
that marketing presence, that brand presence, to keep ahead of our friends and family and referrals, which thankfully keep coming in. But we've got to, you need to get that new, you have to hunt as well as farm to borrow the cliche.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. You're right on the money. And it's one of those things that, organic growth is great, right? And always having that, it means you're doing a good job, right? Like that's what I always tell people. It's like, hey, if you're getting organic growth and people referring you, you're getting your, referrals from that means that whatever you're doing, keep doing in terms of that. But then obviously, as you know, and as most business owners will probably find out if they start a business, there's a point at which they're inconsistent, right? Sometimes it's like you
Yeah.
get, 5 to 10, right? And you get 5 to 10 different referrals. The next month it's like 1 to 2, right? And so there's just almost like inconsistency that comes with, this organic growth
Right.
as well. So it's important to your point to be able to build on top of that. It can't be your only channel, right?
Right.
And you have to diversify the channels that you have as you continue to grow for that itself. So I'm curious for you, Mark. Like as you kind of are looking out, you're obviously you're the 6th year in. What does the vision look like for you guys in the next? I don't like to look 5 years out; it's a little bit too far. But like
Mhm.
next 12 months, like what does that look like for you guys? What are you guys looking to either roll out, or what is the the overall goals?
Next 12 months are solidifying some services that we're seeing are more in need, and that we're fulfilling for some clients, and that I think there's going to be a lot more need for that in the future. That's I've always hated the term virtual CISO,
Mhm.
because there's nothing virtual about it. But
Yeah,
the concept of a fractional CISO, or as we do it in practice, really some hours from principal or executive level consultants like myself and some of the 30-year folks that I have on staff, uh, but also portions, of individials who specialize in different areas,
yeah.
specialize in
Could you elaborate
compliance.
on that? Because I'm just out of curiosity for because I mean I've heard the term thrown out all the time, virtual CISO, fractional CISO. Why are you, say that maybe you hate that term? I'm curious to get your
I,
perspective on that.
because truthfully, I think it's a full-time mindset. It's a full-time commitment,
Mm,
and I think a lot of times it's delivered in more of just a cookie cutter kind of deliverables based way. When
yeah,
what you really need to do is while it might not be a full-time role, it's kind of a full-time commitment to an organization to say, I'm here when you need me for that CISO role, and so your mind always has to be on them, and you have to kind of identify as part of their team.
yeah.
So, again, I listen, we use the term as well, fractional CISO, but truthfully, it's more of it's a dedicated
Well,
resource,
it's a
and
good point, right?
yeah,
Because I mean, it's not like, you put 20 hours in and it's like, well, if there's a cyber attack, then
right,
we went over the limit, right? We can't
yeah,
get you
right. You're
anymore.
always you're always part of that team,
Yeah.
regardless.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
no, no, and I see. So I see what you're saying.
yeah,
Yeah,
and as well, it's kind of a composite team where no one CISO uh, they're few and far between where you have an executive presence and a strategic mindset and can get, into the nitty gritty of the latest, technology. Usually you've got to have a staff of people that specialize in various areas, and you bring a portion of them to the table, and together you form what that organization needs in terms of a cybersecurity supplement.
Yeah, yeah. And so when it comes to, obviously once you guys have built that out, are you guys planning on, at some point, doing anything with software or going down that route, or are you guys strictly going to be just in the, the consulting side of the piece?
Yeah. I think there's so much need still and into the future for really quality, high value professional services, and our clients get a lot of value out of us.
Yeah,
I definitely I want Latitude to kind of be one of the premier
got
names
it.
in particularly healthcare cybersecurity.
Yeah,
Um, Software, in my view, where that fits into that, I've always been of the viewpoint that, we'll have to abandon certain things that we still do in Excel, certain things we do on certain platforms that, third-party platforms. I think software comes into play to enhance and allow for greater scalability of that. I see software being able to really assist with third-party risk management, but and we hear this from our clients, and I think it's the reason we have had success, is that we never replace critical thinking with
hmm.
automation. That cannot be emphasized enough,
A
and I
great
think
point.
that's where we've kind of hit our niche, is that you can do that to help manage the workload of what you have to do, but you can't replace the critical thinking, knowledgeable person to take a look at everything and say, this doesn't add up, or I'm not comfortable with what you have here in terms of a strategy. We need to, maybe call that out as a risk and talk about some ways to mitigate that.
Yeah, it's a great point. I'm curious as you're even, do you think we'll ever get to a point at some point where, either AI or the software will be able to critical think? Do you think do you think they'll ever have that ability?
I think from a kind of a governance, risk, and compliance standpoint, yes, because you could, we're talking about a high degree of integration. In the future, you can take finite items that are, compliance requirements, and maybe somehow dynamically automate getting evidence of compliance, to that. However, I don't think that you ever really want the replacement. And I'll go to, I'll date myself and go back to the War Games movie, right? So what I did in the Air Force was literally what that opening scene is. The two individuals there, um, and the tenet of that movie was, let's replace the human factor with software, because one person didn't have the intestinal fortitude to turn that key and launch the missile.
Yeah.
Um, in the reality, the military designs it so that two officers are always in that decision, right? And so in that decision chain, so that you have trusted individuals who understand when to execute and when not to execute. So I'm a big proponent on when it comes to security, when it comes to the fail safes of incredibly critical elements.
Yeah.
Nuclear weapons, critical data, interchange them. I think that there always is a place for trusted advice and trusted
Definitely. Definitely.
and
Yeah.
experienced decisions.
100%, 100%. And it's one of those things that, it's always a conversation that my partners and I will have about where AI will disrupt, and then where
Yeah,
I don't ever see it, being able to take over. Right. And to your point, there's certain things, that, I like that. You wouldn't leave that in the hands of, of someone else, of an AI agent or something that
right.
would take that workflow over, because of how important it is, right? And
Mm,
how attention to detail it needs to be,
yeah.
right? Um, but
There,
oh, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. There's one. Cybersecurity is if done right, it involves people, process, and technology. Technology is one element. People and process are invaluable. And there's an experience I had a number of years back prior to Latitude, but a client, it was a health system. There was a physician practice that was affiliated with the health system. That physician got, must have clicked on a phishing email, and the attacker was able to spoof that physician's email and
Hmm.
request to the health system, "Hey, I want to change my direct deposit info." And they said, "Great, we'll get right on it." As a part of the process, the human resource staff, before they actually put the final, execution of making that change in, they call the requester. Say, "Hey, Doctor So and So, we're ready to make that change as you requested." And that doctor said, "What are you talking about?"
Mm.
So if we're leaving it all to technology, that would have gone through. There's
Yeah.
no substitution for procedural things to interrupt what otherwise would have been a successful technological attack, but you had a procedural and a human element that stopped it. So we can come up with a number of those examples, and that's kind of where I see it. Technology is a critical piece of it. It's always going to be there, and we need more of it. But technology without process and without people is not really going to be all that effective.
Well, you heard it here first. You're not losing your job towards AI just yet. Not yet.
Hopefully not.
No, I agree though. It's right. It's all about having the ability to have a person, right? We're not there yet. We're not that advanced. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in 2030, and 20, 30, 40 years where we'll be at with technology at that point. But in the next 5 to 10 years, I find it very hard for us to be at that level where, to your point, we're going to be where you're always going to need a person right
Yeah.
there to be able to monitor things at the current.
Technology will certainly be a
Yeah.
force multiplier. It will always be an arms race between, the bad guys who are going to, leverage AI and whatever other technologies emerge
Yeah.
uh, to exploit vulnerabilities versus the good guys that are going to use those same platforms to detect and repel attacks.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it will always be a part of it. For the folks trying to protect their organizations, it can be a force multiplier, but it can't be the answer either.
Yep. Well, I think that's the perfect note to end over here, Mark. Thanks so much for stopping by and coming on the show. It's been a pleasure getting the chance to talk a little bit about what you guys are doing, what you're building over at Latitude. I definitely think it's something special. And if people are listening to this, they want to reach out to you or your team. What are the best ways to go ahead and find you guys?
You could certainly go to our website. That's latitudeinfosec.com, and there's a button there to contact us. Or you could look at us on LinkedIn. That's linkedin.com/company/latitudeinfosec.
Beautiful. Well, I'll make sure to include both of those in the description so you guys can go check it out. If you guys are listening to this, make sure to go check out Mark and the team. And we appreciate you guys if you did make it all the way to the end. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks again, Mark. Era un piacere.
Thank you. There you go.